Today we're going to talk about some wrist and forearm openers, because this area, if you've had any old injuries, carpal tunnel, you're on a computer a lot, any of those things, this can become really limiting. And especially also if you've had any sort of epicondylitis. So on this side it would be a golfer's elbow or medial epicondylitis, or tennis elbow, lateral epicondylitis. So these wrist openers, the things we're going to do today, will help any of these scenarios. So here's what we're going to start with. Something super simple. You may have seen this before, but I'm going to give you a couple of tips on this. It is the wrist flexor opener. So these are your wrist flexors, and all you're going to do is open your hand, but the key part about this is making sure that you straighten your elbow. So that would be just a simple wrist flexor opener, because you're extending at the wrist. So that one. Next one, really simple. I would hold that, by the way, for about 20 to 30 seconds, is going into the wrist flexed position to stretch the extensors. You don't have to remember any of this. Just know that you started with your palm up and opening that way. The next one, you're going palm down and opening this way. But the key thing again is straightening the elbow. It's the straightening of the elbow that will allow a greater length through the wrist extensor. So here we go, just opening that way. So those are two really simple ones you can do anywhere with anything. Now we're going to go through some extras that I think are perfect for when you finish your workout. This is not ideal to do. The ones I'm about to show you are not ideal to do when you're really cold. But if you've finished a workout, your whole body is warm, or it's a really warm temperature outside, that would be a good time to do it. So I'm going to go down onto the ground here, and this is a 4-point stance. So I'm going to go into a 4-point stance, and all I'm going to do is get my hands not necessarily just underneath my shoulder, but a little further back. And when they're a little further back and my fingers are pointing forward, I'm just going to rock forward and back with my elbows straight and with my hands flat on the ground. Now the next part of this is simply to do the same thing, but we're flipping over. So you're going here. Now some of you will do this and just looking at it are going to think, oh my goodness, can't do it. So if you're in a position where you feel like you can't get your wrists flat or your hands flat on the ground and your elbows are bent, then all you're going to do is go with that hands flat position and gently work on straightening your elbow. So that would be your next step, gently working on straightening the elbow. So this position and then this position. Now we're going to change this just a little bit. We're going to go into a position like this, where your fingers are facing each other. Same thing with your hands flat. If you can't straighten your elbows, just from here, work on straightening your elbows. If you can straighten your elbows, then you're going to go back and forth, stretching more deeply into the wrist flexors. And now we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to do this now for the wrist extensors. We flipped over. Again, if you're really tight in this area, you are not going to move back and forth, but you're simply going to work on straightening your elbows gently and slowly. If you can straighten your elbows, you're going to go back and forth. And gently open both arms through your wrist extensors. Now, I've given you something here and here. That's going to be the most basic version of opening the wrists and opening the wrist extensors and flexors. I've given you one that's a little more advanced. We've gone down onto the mat. Now I'm going to give you a couple things that are further and more advanced than what we've done so far. So this is only if you have really good range of motion and you know that you're going to be able to do the previous ones I've already shown you. So the next one, what we'll do is we'll go back like this, pinkies touching each other, and from here, now we're going to go back this way. And again, open this up just a little bit more. And if you're in gymnastics or something that requires a lot of wrist work, The next one we're going to do is even more challenging, and it looks like this. You're gonna switch all the way around. Your pinkies are again touching, but now you are internally rotated, and now you're going back and forth again. So this one probably looks a little odd, but if you are in a sport that requires a lot of upper body work, a lot of wrist extension work, like gymnastics, then this will be one that will be very important for you. And then again, you can open up. If you've gone for one position for a while, you can change and switch positions. Now there's another one I'm going to give you right now, and it is for some of the rotation. We have these little muscles that pronate and supinate through our wrist or our forearm and allow our wrist to have greater movement. So one thing that you can do here, especially if you have the range of motion, you're going to put your hand down with your palm up. You're going to put your fist in and anchor that hand and simply pronate and supinate back and forth. So this is another one working on your overall mobility. And then I would switch sides, do the same thing, pronate and supinate, just anchoring my hand down in that wrist flexed position. All right, so there's two more things we're gonna do, and these are just getting the bigger picture in this whole scenario. So now we've done a wrist flexor and extensor, our easiest version. We've gone and done some on the mat in a 4-point position. We've also done some more advanced movements in positions that are much more challenging. Lastly, you don't want to forget that typically if you've had some issues here in mobility or issues in your elbow with mobility, then you're looking at always having to take a look at the joint above or below. There's often a contributor there. So lastly, you may want to take a look at opening the long head of biceps. This would be the front of your shoulder. And the way you can do this is simply pop your hand on a bench and lower yourself down while looking away from that opened shoulder. That will open the long head of biceps. So we target a little bit of the front of that shoulder. You can also do the same thing on a mat by putting your fingers away from you as close as you can together and then moving your body forward and sinking into that position. That as well will open the long head of biceps. Lastly, for the back part of the shoulder is opening the lats. If you can open the lats a little bit, whether it's overhead and leaning away, or even using a bench where you have your elbows anchored and you drop your chest. And you can do a wall stretch like that as well, but the point is opening some of the muscles in the front of the shoulder and the back of the shoulder that have us closed up and will influence our wrist extensors and flexors and our wrists. So that's why we will address something in front of the shoulder and behind the shoulder, because if we're missing that, sometimes we're missing one of the main contributors to why we may have some immobility in these areas in our lower part of our limb. Okay, so try those out. I hope those serve you in making some progress in an area that we often neglect, but can be really big in having you function optimally for all the things that you want to do.